Well, here we are, watching another one of these great signs of Jesus. Another one of these times when Jesus is working these great miracles that we hear all through the Gospel of John. The first one we heard about was a very long time ago in the early chapters of John's Gospel. In fact, it's in the second chapter of John's Gospel where they're attending a wedding feast and they're running out of wine, and Jesus' mother says to him, they're running out of wine, and Jesus says, well, what do you want me to do about it? And Jesus turns water into wine. We don't think too much about that one. It's a great sign. I mean, how many of us can do that? Jesus saves parents and celebrants from a bit of embarrassment, from the castigation of the community for lack of planning, perhaps, or perhaps the embarrassment of not providing for the community. It's only the beginning. Throughout John's Gospel, Jesus continues to do these signs. Jesus reaches out. Most of these great signs that Jesus performs are signs of healing, where he touches people. He touches them in such a way that he restores them. And that's really the through line for almost all of the healing stories, these great signs that Jesus works. In fact, scholars divide up the Gospel of John into these various sections, and they call it the book of signs. And just about in every one of them, as we've already mentioned, Jesus makes some sort of pronouncement about his identity. Today, we hear the final one, because this is perhaps of all signs that Jesus works, we might count this as the greatest among them all. I mean, we might have seen some of the other healing miracles that Jesus performed. About just the other day, we heard about Jesus giving sight to someone who was blind. Well, George, you've done that. We have a healer in our midst. An ENT specialist, a researcher from Hershey Med. Doesn't do too much of that anymore, but, he did it in his day. Things that actually have now become commonplace. Those of us who are wearing eyeglasses of a certain age, many of us have had lovely thing called cataract surgery, where suddenly you open your eyes and you can see the world in a way you never saw, or you had seen it before, but you hadn't seen it in a long time. Some of you are smiling, you know what I'm talking about. I've been there. That's miraculous. If you've ever been at the edge of a runway, particularly you see a big cargo jet taking off. If you've ever been near the airbase at Dover, see a huge C-130 taking off, knowing that it's loaded down with tanks or supplies. You can just feel the ground rumbling as it's taking off, and you go like, how do they get all of that into the air? Well, I know that physics and engineering makes it happen, but I can't figure it out. To me, it's miraculous. Miracles are, relatively speaking, easy to perform if you know what you're doing. But this one, haven't figured this one out yet. Jesus, in the narrative, in the story, as it's told to us in the Gospel of John, is making very sure that Lazarus is dead. It almost seems cruel, because Martha and Mary are mourning their brother, and Jesus is hanging back. They sent word, your friend, the one that you love, is sick. They know that he can heal him, restore him to health, but he stays a couple days longer. By the time he gets to Bethany, which isn't too far away from Jerusalem, he's dead. Not only is he dead, he's buried. And it's been a while. This is Palestine. It's hot. 4 days. Now, you don't want to take that stone away, Martha says. It's not going to be pleasant. Jesus makes very sure there is no doubt Lazarus is dead. But this, in John's Gospel, is the last of the great signs. And at the end of this process, Jesus has this last pronouncement. He says, I am resurrection and life. He's already said, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I'm the good shepherd, I'm all these different things, and they all are very nice and very comforting, but this last one is just a bit much to take. And maybe it is a bit much to take for a lot of people. It's probably a bridge too far for most of us. In fact, it was a bridge too far for the religious leaders of Jesus' time as well. Because, see, this gospel, as we have it in today's lesson, ends one verse too short. If we would open up our Bibles and we would go one verse longer, we would find out that it was a bridge too far for the leaders of Jesus' time as well. Because it was this sign that put them over the edge. It was this sign that said, all right, this one, he's got to go. He's got to go. But why? You see, the reality was that Jesus spent his entire life, his entire mission, his entire ministry healing people. And throughout the time, we've talked about this a bit, that in the context, the cultural context, the religious understanding of Jesus' time, particularly among the religious people of Jesus' time, if you were chronically ill, this was seen as a curse from God. That this was something that was telling others that you had committed sin. This was the first question out of the mouth of the disciples just about a week ago or so. What did they say? Who committed sin, this man or his parents, because he was born blind? Whose sin was it, Lord? That tells everything right there. And so it is that if you died before your time, more than likely this too was a curse of God. So, when you were sinful or participated in evil, God brought this misfortune into your life. You became poor. You became ill. You were cursed with being lame or blind or mute or deaf or with some other malady. And so you were pushed to the edge of society. You became a beggar. You had no way of living in polite society. And there's this Jesus walking around saying, oh, be healed. Be healed. And it wasn't just about making you well. It was about restoring you to your family. It was about bringing you back into your community. It was about bringing you back into society. It was about restoring you from the edges back into the center. It was about bringing you into. It was about including you. It didn't matter. Suddenly, you were part of the whole again. Those people whose stock and trade, whose job it was to sort out who needed to be pushed out, they didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. Jesus made them very uncomfortable. Now, this was the bridge too far. Because if he didn't only make the blind to see, and the deaf to hear, and the mute to speak, and the lame to walk, and restore people to their place in society, and the lepers clean, and etc., 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 but now he was even making the dead live, and people began, because of that, to believe everything else he was telling them about God, that God is this God of love, that this God is a God of justice, that this God is a God who doesn't care about all these jots and tittles of the law. If you live the spirit of the law, oh my goodness, this one can upset the entire thing. And they're believing in him now. It's over. He's got to go. And so Thomas, he gets it. He understands. So he says, all right, if he's going to go down to Jerusalem, we better go with him and be ready to die. Yes. This is the beginning of the end. That's why we read this gospel on this day. This is the end of Lent. This week is the last week of Lent. Next week it's Holy Week. And we'll get to that soon enough. But let's keep talking about Lazarus for just a minute. Because Lazarus, you see, was very, 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 very dead. But you see, Jesus didn't raise him from the dead the way Jesus would come to life at Easter Sunday. Jesus merely restored him to life. Lazarus would die again. Lazarus was really given a new lease on life, as it were, for a short time. Something we always want for ourselves. But Lazarus, perhaps like those of us who sort of cheat death a little bit, maybe, when we sort of get a good prognosis after we think we have a bad one, and treatment rescues us for a bit. We change our perspective on things, and maybe we resolve to live life a little bit differently, a little bit better, a little bit more fully. Maybe that's what Lazarus can teach us, is that we can care a bit more, we can love a bit more deeply, we can do things a bit differently. We can take on a different perspective on life. Maybe that's what Lazarus can teach us. In fact, we don't need to hold on to life so dearly, so completely. Maybe we can let go of it more easily when finally we are called from this life. Yes, Lazarus. Lazarus is restored. And he becomes a marvel to the people, a wonderment, a scandal. This one was dead. But look who sets him free. Was it Jesus? Jesus merely said, Lazarus, come forth. Who does he say set him free? You. 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 Untie him. We are the ones who need to unbind. We are the ones who, once Christ raises up and gives freedom to those who are at the margins, to those who have been restored, to those who have been given a new lease on life, we are the ones who need to take the wrappings off, the bindings off, to restore. We are the ones who are told to set them free. We are the ones who are told. Maybe we're scared to do so. I'd be scared if somebody's been dead for 4 days in a tomb in Palestine in the heat. I wouldn't want to be the first one to take off the wrappings. I can guarantee that to you. But that's what Jesus told us to do. Are you afraid to do it? Are you afraid to welcome in the one who has been restored by God? Are you the one who is afraid to free up the one who has been restored? who now can walk once blind, or see once blind, who walk once lame? Are you the one who's afraid to welcome in the stranger? Are you the one who's afraid to welcome in the one who was once at the edge of society, who was as smelly as one who was in the tomb for 4 days? Are you the one who would set them free? Jesus didn't take off the cloth. He told them to do it. He's telling us to do it now. He's telling us, don't be afraid. I'm the one who does the hard work. Now you set them free. You live in me. I live in you. Now you set them free. You go out into the world. You find them. You heal them. You bring them in. You make them walk. You give them sight. You feed them. You give them a place to stay. You heal them. You restore them. You give them life again. Like Ezekiel prophesied over a field of dead bones, you give them sinew and flesh. You give them skin. Let me breathe my life into them and they will live. But I need you. For you are my life. You are my flesh and blood in this world. You are my body. You are my church. You are the body of Christ. Risen, transformed, alive. Be me. Be Jesus. Friends, Jesus calls us here, not simply to entertain us, but to show us the way. He calls us here to command us, to get us ready, to make us fit for the mission that He has from God. He calls us here to show us what to do, and then to send us into the world that we might be ready to face our fears, to unwrap the dead and let them go free, to restore them to the life that you already have, to restore them to the life that He is. For He has promised, I am resurrection, and I am life. Anyone who believes in me, even though they die, will live forever. He gives that to you now. Take it. Take it. Live it. Walk with Him. In the days to come, He asks us to walk with Him to Jerusalem. Like Thomas, let us go with Him, knocking on the gates, spreading our cloaks and our palms before Him. Let us walk with Him to the cross on Calvary. Let us share that bread before that gruesome day. Let us wait as He smolders in the tomb. And then let us rejoice with Him as He says, I am alive. Rejoice with me and sing with me, for I live.